Welcome, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about the Zealot. The Zealot has a lot of viable roles, but those roles are involved in small gangs or, fleets. So I'm not really going to go into details on those roles today, but it is a bit useful though for you to know, just because when you're flying a solo in a Zealot, the enemy usually has no idea what to expect. They've got no idea if you're actually soloing. People rarely solo in a Zealot, and sometimes they just assume that you're isolated from your gang if they have good intel, and that can work to your benefit. It might make people much more willing to engage you. So the Zealot is a ship that is rarely used for solo, and seeing a Zealot alone is a little bit like seeing a Maelstrom alone in Nullsec. You just assume, okay, he's isolated, he's travelling, he's not in a solo fit, we should be able to gank him quite easily. But that, of course, isn't the case. This Zealot fit provides a unique role, though. There's not many other ships in the game that operates in the same way as the Zealot. So pretty much just imagine a slow vagabond, right, that does more DPS at 28 kilometers, but has a lot more stability, but is more vulnerable against frigates. That's the trade-off for the Zealot compared to the other hacks. You lose speed, you lose tackler kill ability. You're only vulnerable to tacklers if they get on top of you. If they don't get on top of you, then you kill them easily, but that is a very big risk when running solo. So basically, you're slower and you have worse anti-support capabilities, but for the benefit of much better stayability due to the effective hit points and the active tank, etc., and also the better DPS that you do at a realistic range at 28k. So, for instance, if you engaged a few drakes in a vagabond, you're never going to kill anything. You're never going to kill the drakes. But in the case of the Zealot, it's actually possible. So, the Zealot is better suited for killing bigger ships than frigates, pretty much. And people generally don't expect it either, which, makes it a great ship. But like I said, it's not as strong against interceptors, and you have to be very, very careful when scepters are considered. You have to stay aligned at all times. If you think the guy is going to get on top of you, you warp away, etc., etc. So, saying that, the Zealot does provide a unique role. It's a bit like a brick in terms of hacks, but it's a brick that should stay 30k away from battlecruisers all the time. And at this range, most ships do terrible damage compared to you. Hurricanes, vagabonds, etc. And also the natural resistances your ship has is great against the things that can actually hit you, which is, for the most part, ships with barrage loaded and Scourge missiles. Of course, Scorch from Oracles, etc., and Null, etc., from Taloses is going to hurt you a lot. They're way less common than ships that use Barrage and Scourge. So, with that in mind, your survivability against the average battlecruiser is immense. It's really, really good. And you get a lot of kills that way by just kiting at 30k with a combination of your good-ish damage and your stayability. The Zealot doesn't have that much cargo space though, and also it's a very, very capacitor-intensive ship. It takes a lot of capacitor to run everything, and most of the time you're not going to be able to run everything. So you need to be as efficient as possible, capacitor-wise. But in terms of, what to use over what, mobility is usually by far more important than keeping your reps running. So, keeping that in mind, it is quite important. You always prioritize your micro updrive over your reps if you need to pull range or not. So for the first fight, I ended up roaming towards G-L in Vale of the Silent. P3 at the time was empty, so I just kept roaming to G-L. G-L is a system that is inhabited by renters, and the most significant thing about this is that I think renters are much more willing to fight than most major alliances when you enter their space. Because for that reason is that most people in the major alliances, they get enough PvP to satisfy them from all the fleet ops they do, and they don't really bother fighting people that roam in their space as much as renters, because they're in care bear mode, they're in making ISK mode. But for the renters, they usually welcome people that roam their space. I mean, welcome by trying to fight back. It's a much more common occurrence because these guys are not. They're not in big fleets as often as the other alliances. They don't get enough PvP as they'd like. So when some PvP does come their way, they will try and take it. So knowing who occupies certain space you're roaming to is quite important in some cases in understanding your targets better. The social structure of the two types is also different. The main alliances, they're much more strict. I mean, they do make fun of each other when they die needlessly to roamers, etc., while renters treat it more as a game, which they should, and I applaud them for doing that. So with a fight itself, I just basically walked to the station, and at the time there were people ratting in anomalies, but I couldn't find any of them in time. So I went to the station, I walked in at about 50 kilometer, and then I started frapsing after a Drake burned in for me and tackled me. So at this point I'm just trying to negate as much damage as possible, trying to stay outside the missile range of the second Drake while I'm applying full damage to this Drake. This Drake is putting quite a lot of damage on me though, just because he's able to shoot me for a long, extended period of time. This Drake is in pretty much a max tank fit. He's got MDD point and then full tank, and that's it. The Tengu warps in, and this Tengu could potentially warp to this Drake at this point. I'm very worried about this Tengu, because if the Tengu does come in, I can't negate any of his damage. If he comes in, I'm going to be taking his full damage because he's not limited by the same factors as the Drake is limited by, which is range. So the Tengu comes in and he puts full damage on me. So I decided to take my pill to try and tank it. Notice that the Drake just turned around. That Drake is burning right towards that Tengu right now. That Drake is relying on the Tengu for the Tengu to peel me off the Drake. That Drake is pretty much running towards that Tengu, so the Tengu can kind of cover him. So at this point, if I do go towards that Drake, I'm putting myself at risk. That's what the Drake wants in this case. I oblige and I burn in, but notice I'm burning at a 60-degree angle to the right side right now. And the reason I'm doing this is just so I can kind of stay within damage range of the Drake, but also hopefully stay outside tackle range of the Tengu. But obviously I do get webbed at this point, but I've got enough momentum to get outside web range. And I'm trying to semi-commit, I guess. I want to stay within point range, but I don't want to get any close range scrams or webs at me. And the Hurricane and Drake warps in, so there's 3 Drakes and the Hurricane and Tengu on the field right now. But at this point I'm in a very, very comfortable position, with the Drake burning away from me and me burning towards him. I'm basically, going further away from his friends. So I'm in a very comfortable position right now. I'm not really committing myself at all, while I'm still able to put full damage on this Drake. This moment right now, this moment just shows how powerful the Zealot is at this role. I mean, I'm able to take a lot of punishment, I'm able to put a lot of damage at semi-good range, and I don't have to commit to put that damage. And I'm about to kill this Drake, and I'm just gonna speed this up right now. So at this point, I'm actually low on cap boosters and a bit low on armor. This just emphasizes how important cap management is on this ship. So I'm at low cap boosters, low armor, and what's going through my mind right now is that there's no chance at all of me able to kill a Drake with what little I have left. So I'm just going to go for this Hurricane. There's still a chance of me maybe being able to kill a Hurricane. Hurricanes generally have quite low EHP, especially if they're shield tank, and also, with Scorch, the Hurricane's going to be taking my full damage. So I'm just going for this Hurricane right now, and I'm hoping that he dies and keeps burning after me. But I'm getting a bit worried at this point because the other Drake, the one with damp, is catching up with me, and the Drake is actually going quite fast. He's going nearly 1.6k a second. and I'm pretty much completely dependent on the hurricane burning after me to be able to kill him, because I don't want to commit. And at this point, I'm kind of in a risky situation. But I decided to burn upwards because I noticed that hurricane stopped burning towards me. The hurricane started burning towards the station. So at this point, I was taking a risky move by burning towards the hurricane because it took me closer to the Drake, but it pulled off. However, my cap booster just offline. However, that was my last cap booster, and at this point, I'm just going to conserve all my capacitor for the micro drive and my guns. But the hurricane warps out because he had a walker stab fitted. So he got away. The only guy with a point right now is this Drake, and I'm just going to keep burning away. I'm not going much faster than him, overloaded though. I mean, I have to overload to get outside of his range, and I'm wondering if I actually can get out. So I'm considering offlining my plate at this point. Then I noticed that I am going much faster than him, and I am going to get out. So I decided against offlining my plates. If I did offline my plates though, my agility would have gone up, my acceleration would have gone up, my max speed would have gone up. I mean, my agility would have gone up a lot, and if the Drake was as fast as me, offlining my plate could have potentially saved me. And I didn't need that armor anyway, because at the time I was in, very, very low armor. So it's worth considering things like that when you need to get out while you have a plate fitted, especially if you're in low armor. So that fight just highlights how important capacitor efficiency is, and how we should treat a capacitor and how valuable it is, I guess, but also how important positioning is in this particular fight. Like how that Drake started burning away towards the Tengu, and I had to kind of stay within damage range of the Drake, but try not to get tackled in the meantime. So, things like that you need to always watch out for, and precision manual piloting is very important. When you zoom in and just try and pilot to the best ability as possible. Situational awareness, helps that so much, and you obviously won't be able to pick that up straight off the bat, but you will be able to with experience and maybe a little bit of practice. I did have links in that fight though, but the half of my capacitor actually goes into my lasers and my micro drive, and I'm pretty much running my micro drive all the time in that fight. I wasn't really pulsing it because I was going as fast as they were. I mean, I was going a bit faster, but in the end I had to micro drive all the time to keep my range. So only half of my cap was going towards my tank, and the links I had, it only made my tank a more capacitor effective. So in that mind, not having links doesn't actually nerf me that much. So I decided to come up with a fit that I could use that doesn't need links, and to be able to use it to its max effectiveness. So and this is the fit. So basically what I've changed compared to the original fit is that I've dropped one of the medium armor reps, mainly because, I wasn't able to perma-run both anyway. The second rep was actually a waste, most of the time. So I switched that rep with an armor kinetic hardener. Now, I have an armor thermic hull, I know, but the only damage that is thermal I'm actually going to be taking in most realistic scenarios is actually only from a Talos, and nothing else pretty much. I mean, consider a Drake or a Hurricane, which, one of the most common ships in 0-0, especially Drakes. They're, most of the time, like 90% plus of the time, they are going to be using Scourge against you. And having such a brilliant tank against Scourge goes a very long way. And also, most Hurricanes, if you're at 20k plus, they will actually load barrage on you because they can't reach out that far with their traditional ammo. And of course, Kinetic Hardener is great against barrage. And another case is with Scorch, long range long range laser ammo for close range guns. The Scorch actually mainly does EM damage. 80% of it comes from EM. So that means there's only 20% thermal. So getting hit by Scorch isn't that bad for you either. And you have to remember that antimatter and the null is actually only half and half between kinetic and thermal. So, yeah, fitting a kinetic hardener instead of a thermal is actually the best choice given your playstyle, because your playstyle revolves around you kiting, and most applied DPS coming to you is actually going to be kinetic. So yeah, there you go, kinetic hardener. Also, I've switched the rig, the armor tanking rig, I think it was auxiliary nano pump, for a Tech 2 energy burst rig. And basically, you know, having the medium armor up dropped means I've got extra power grid, and I want to make use of that. And that rig actually gives me 50 DPS more. And these Tech 2 rigs are not that expensive, they're like 15 million-esque, and they're very, very, very great. I mean, they're very good. When stacking penalty is considered, the biggest bonus is always apply dust, okay? So, if you apply a Tech 2 energy burst with a 2 damage mod fit, the Tech 2 energy burst is considered before the 2 heat sinks. So, you capitalize on this. I mean, you still get the full bonus of the damage damage modifier from the other heat sinks, but the rate of fire is the only one that is nerfed by the presence of your energy burst. So with that in mind, a Tech 2 energy burst actually modifies your DPS by a big amount. And even if you have 4 damage mods, having this Tech 2 energy burst will actually increase your DPS by a big margin still. And these rigs are definitely underutilized, and they're actually very, very strong. Especially with tier 3 BCs, if you can afford to buy them. So basically, in the long run, this fit gives you better survivability against most damage that is applied to you, and also you get more DPS basically. And you know, if you don't have Legion links, then this is definitely the fit for you. It does make an important. I mean, it does show something that's quite important though. That you should not always plug a hole just because, you know, it doesn't look nice. It's worth considering what damage types is actually going to be applied to you with your playstyle, pretty much. I mean, if I was a close range brawler, then yes, I will definitely prefer not to have that hole. Because, you know, ogres, if you commit to a fight, so there's ogres, there's hammerheads, there's guards, and, you know, there's of course blasters. And with the case of guards, you know, Tech 2 sentry drones, they can still hit you till 30k, but you'd obviously just, you know, move outside of their range, and the target has to re-scoop them. So, yeah, it's only railguns, I guess, which is not very common, and Taloses that will actually be applying damage to you that does thermal damage. So I decided to go back to G-L, same pocket as the first fight, in this new Zealot, and I haven't got a scout, or no links or anything, etc. Also no implants. So on my first jump into 0-0, I walked to a bounce spot close to the outgate, the IP gate, and I saw an Ares and a Malediction tackle a Nighthawk. If there were other ships, I would have probably joined in, but the fact there was an Ares and a Malediction, it just screams that they're tackling for a fleet, because no one really uses Ares and Maledictions for very, very small gang stuff, other than for, you know, tackle for fleets like this. So what I decided to do was, you know, just ignore them and just try and go my own way. What I just did then, you know, walking to the gate like that might seem risky, but from my perspective, I just thought they'd be too preoccupied with ganking the Nighthawk, and also they weren't expecting. I mean, I really, really doubt they'd expect me to do what I did, so I wasn't expecting them to set up anything for me. So that clip shows that you should expect that there will be a gang behind fleet interceptors like the Ares and Malediction. The fleet wasn't there when I warped in initially. It took them about 30 seconds to come in. And also, with experience and, you know, intuition, etc., you will have a good idea what the enemy is actually thinking, and when running through camps in the manner that I did might be safe or not. So a few jumps later, I jumped into a Cerberus while whopping away. I hit my scan, and my previous scan had a Falcon on it. My new scanner, no Falcon. That means the Falcon just cloaked, and he's active. So now, there's a Falcon moving around with this gang, and I'm not sure what they have yet. So with the Falcon presence, that just gives a bigger emphasis on to separate the enemy, because if I don't do it, and if I get tackled, and if the Falcon is present while I'm tackled, I'm dead in the water, basically. So I just walked to the HE gate and I jumped through, and I see this Enu. What's going through my mind right now is that I can get this kill because I know he's not alone, and he might actually go for me because he's not alone. He might feel, safe to go for me, especially with the presence of the Falcon nearby. For some reason he doesn't go for me right off the bat, but he does start approaching me when he's in structure, but he dies. Anyway, but a Falcon being present in a gang a presence of a Falcon just makes a lot of people be more aggressive than they would otherwise, because a Falcon provides such a blanket of safety. Anyway, a random Tempest comes out of nowhere, and so right now I know they got Cerberus, Tempest, and Falcon, and the only thing I could possibly do at this point is just to burn away directly away from the Falcon and just hope that the Cerberus burns towards me. So what's going through my mind right now? I want to get 100k from that Falcon, so the Falcon, is not going to jam me, and for the Cerberus to get close to me. But that isn't the case. The Cerberus isn't burning for me at all. I think the Cerberus doesn't have a micrograb in this case, so that plan fails. So the best thing I can do is just to keep warping around and just hope that they form up with more ships, or maybe they'll bring something that I can actually kill. So after warping around a little bit, I came back to the gate where the Tempest was. The Tempest, the Cerberus and Falcon is not on the grid right now, and me just playing around at this range, I'm just hoping that the Cerberus comes in at range. I'm hoping the Cerberus comes in at range and presents himself as a viable target, and he does come at range. But a Dremel immediately comes out of warp right after, and I wasn't hitting my close range scanner as much as I should have. But with the presence of the Dremel and with the Falcon nearby, if I got tackled, I would be dead in the water. So I had to warp out, and I just need to keep doing what I'm doing. I just need to keep moving around, try and wait for them to make a mistake. It does emphasize how important it is to stay aligned as often as you can when you're in this sort of situation, when you're warping around all the time, trying to avoid making any mistakes and trying to avoid getting tackled. So after warping around a little bit, I came back to the LZ gate, and I landed on these two. As soon as I come out of warp, I hit warp. I want one of them to aggress me. The Dremel aggresses, so now I'm free to jump through without the Dremel coming through with me. The Tempest follows, but I do know that I've got no chance in doing anything to the Tempest, so I just, burn back to the gate. I could have potentially burned away from the gate, but the Tempest does have very good damage projection, and I wouldn't really be able to handle it, so I decided to just go back to the gate. And as I jumped through, I noticed this Dremel not moving at all, so it's going through my mind right now, maybe I could two-shot the Dremel. But a Tyrannus comes in, followed by an Oracle, so I immediately de-aggro and just try and get back to the gate. But I get scrambled 10k off the gate, and at this moment I'm thinking, I might be in trouble. I wasn't keeping a close eye on my close range scanner, so I didn't know this gang was coming in. So they had, formed up, and I was being too complacent. However, notice the Oracle, he's approaching me, and right now I'm trying to, maximize my traversal by going up a bit. That Oracle is doing literally no damage to me at this point. And he tries to move around a bit, but I then move downwards, try and keep maximum traversal up, and the Oracle is just not doing any damage to me whatsoever right now. The Cerberus isn't doing much damage to me due to, how over-tanked I am to kinetic. Dremel isn't doing anything either due to my native resistances. It's only the Tyrannus that is actually doing good damage to me. And, Tempest and Drake came in as I jumped up. In that case, I was being quite incompetent, I guess, and that was a big mistake on my part, but luck has a big part to play with these sort of situations if you die or get a kill, etc. So I wanted to enter that system I just left safely, so I jumped into LZ and then I warped to the B-5 gate. and then I warped to the G-L gate. In the meantime, they were following me into B-5, so I went to LZ, and then I went back into HE. At this time, I was, free to enter, but they were still following me, and then I warped to the MC gate. And as I came out of warp on the MC gate, an Enyo was in pursuit. So I decided, to jump through and see if I can kill the Enyo, and maybe it will escalate and I could deal with what comes in. So what's going through my mind right now is I think some of their members may have given up, because what I've been doing is so boring for them. I've just been warping from gate to gate, evading all of their tackle, and they've never been close in tackling me, so they must be, very disorganized right now from that fact. So maybe some of them have left the gang. So this Enyo decloaked, and I overload my macro drive and I burn towards that planet. If that Enyo gets within 10k of me, I will die pretty much. So I'm always aligned to that planet, and I'm always ready to warp out. But the Enyo turns around, and I guess I was just going too fast for him too. I mean, Zealot is kind of fast compared to assault frigates. Most of the assault frigates, unless fitted with nanos, etc., are just a little bit faster than the Zealot. So you don't have to worry about assault frigates that much. So he died quite easily, and then this Rupture comes in. And I'm just thinking, oh, easy kill right at this point. And it's also reinforcing the statements I gave earlier about perhaps other people leaving the gang. So I'm just gonna go for this Rupture right here. As long as you stay, outside 10k, you're never gonna get a problem. You're never gonna have a problem with the Rupture as long as you stay outside 10k, because they've got newts, etc. Anyway, so this Tyrannus jumped in, and I'm really, really worried right now. So I start burning immediately away from that Tyrannus, back towards that planet I had previously selected, and I put my damage on him as soon as I can. As soon as he's within my range, I put my damage on him. I mean, I need to ignore that Rupture at this point. What I'm worried about is this Tyrannus. So I'm ready to warp out at this point. I'm not sure if I can kill him before he's within web range, but he dies. He barely dies while outside web range, barely. So I was quite lucky in that sense. But I would have lived in it because I was ready to warp out. So nothing else to do at this point other than burn towards the Rupture and then just try and get the tackle and finish him off. A Tempest did warp in, and Dremel as well. But the Dremel isn't coming for me, and the Tempest is at a, favourable range. I wouldn't have any chance at all fighting that Tempest, so I decided to just ignore it, and the Dremel leaves. So at this point, the fight is over, and I decide to head back to Empire, and wrap up, get cabooses, and then come back. So I came back, and I jumped into the Rupture, same Rupture as I killed before actually. I noticed him burning away from the gate, so I immediately aggroed after I noticed him burning away from the gate, even though he wasn't aggroed at the time. And then Enyo comes in. And then the Kitsune comes in. What's going through my mind right now is that the Rupture doesn't have close range tackle. I know he doesn't have close range tackle, although I'm just assuming. So ECM isn't actually that crucial to my survivability unless I get tackled. So I'm just gonna burn away, and I'm just hoping that I end up getting a lock. I'm hoping that Kitsune ends up losing a jam, and then I can shoot. But at the same time, the Enyo is closing in, but I know that the Rupture would have capped out eventually. Just from personal experience, Rupture would have capped out eventually. But in this case, I was just faster than the Rupture. So I warped out, and I'm just gonna try and keep playing with them. So what I was mainly trying to do then was just keep myself in a position where I wouldn't die, and if the Kitsune loses a gem, I can get a kill. So I've located where they warped to, the gate, down NCGR gates using my directional. They came on my close range scanner, so I knew they were in my cluster, and then I just scanned out all the gates one by one. So I'm now just going to try and do the same thing over and over again. And, eventually I'm going to get lucky. So the Enyo warped to the 8 TP gates, and I followed them, and I just landed on him right here. And I'm just, hoping, I'm just trying to replicate the same scenario as earlier. And having the Enyo aggressed on this side is great, because I just sussed out that he does indeed have a scrambler. So he's the only person that could potentially warp scramble me. Anyway, Kitsune jumps in. I lock him as soon as he decloaks, and actually do get one volley in, which puts him into half shield. And from that alone, I know that Kitsune has no real buffer. He doesn't have a lot of buffer. So he actually loses his jam at this point, and then I go for him again. And it actually took me about 2 seconds to notice I wasn't jammed. It was kind of, I mean, I was so used to being completely perma-jammed that I didn't expect to get that lucky so early on. So the Kitsune died, and then I'm left with this Rupture. And, you know, it's quite clear-cut from what's going to happen from here on out. I'm just going to try and kill this Rupture. The Rupture did get outside point range for a second, but if he was aligned, he would have gotten out. But, yeah, that was quite clear-cut. The main purpose of that fight, I guess, for you, is just to show that ECM is actually not that dangerous if you're not completely tackled, because eventually, you know, they will lose a gem if you're not tackled, and if you're free, you can, you know, capitalize on that when they do lose a gem. And in other situations, you can try and get 100k from the ECM ship, although it wasn't possible in this case, just because it was a frigate that was much faster than I was. So when the enemy does have a Falcon or a Kitsune, etc., as long as you're sure that you can ensure that you have your mobility and you can keep moving around and then, you know, engage when things are better for you. Just as long as you have that mobility, then ECM isn't going to kill you. It's just going to make fights drag on a bit, I guess, like it did in that case. But recognizing what ships can tackle you and what ships will tackle you, etc., is very important. It is also important to recognize that some gangs will engage you because they have ECM, and this just provides more opportunities for you. I mean, the Rupture and Enya probably wouldn't have engaged me if they were completely alone. So, you know, the presence of ECM in this case got me a few kills. Also, regarding the fight before the last fight, where I was warping around between systems a lot, it's very important to do this actually against gangs that you're sure that you can't engage directly. I mean, when people are following you, remember that they're still individuals. When it's a defense gang coming for you, they're not always super organized. I mean, they don't always have an FC, etc. So the decisions they might take is entirely dependent on themselves. So if they're following you between systems, eventually some of them might get bored, some of them will get even more disorganized than they will eventually. And, you know, just separating moving around in the fashion that I did, just provides you more opportunities. As long as you can, you know, try and make sure that you don't die in the process, it's a great way to try and make fights more favorable for you. It does take experience though, especially the parts where you decide when to fight or not, but that will come to you in time.